Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, and we're recording?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. All right, so today gonna kind of change gears again and kind of talk about a task-specific kind of approach with kind of natural language processing and implementation using what we've been seeing in the past few presentations in terms of Hugging Face, BERT, some of those models and approaches. In particular, this week I'm going to talk about kind of question and answering task. So that's kind of one of the common kind of challenges that some of these NLP models are trying to kind of tackle. In particular, there's kind of a few benchmarks. Probably one of the most common ones is called SQuAD. So it's a Standford Question Answering Dataset. And, that's been kind of used for a while. In this, I'm going to show you some code with an example that I kind of spun up. And for this one, I'm going to be using the SQuAD version 2.0. So if you're not familiar with the SQuAD data set, it's essentially just there's a context paragraph that's kind of as the input, and then there's some questions, and the model is trying to answer those questions based on the context that is received. The version 2.0, all that added was it's the same setup, except now there are questions that are kind of built in as impossible to answer based on the context. And so you're trying to also train the model to say, oh, in this case, I don't think I can answer this question because I don't have enough information. So kind of adding, an extra layer of, can we say that we don't know how to answer this question? Just kind of briefly, this is from the SQuAD GitHub. So here's kind of an example of one of those questions and kind of paragraphs. So on the left, you have the context paragraph. So this one's just about Southern California. And all of these have kind of ground truth answers. So they, went through and they have, human answered ground truthing. So paragraph about Southern California and then some questions about that. So, what is Southern California often abbreviated as? And then based on this, the answer is SoCal, and, so on. And there's there can be a few different answers. So that's kind of what we're playing with for this data set, this type of question that we're answering. Okay, so for the code I'm using here, so I'm using Hugging Face, and then I'm also using another package that's built on top of Hugging Face called Simple Transformers. And all that is it just kind of boils down some of the steps and kind of makes things a little more straightforward. I'll send out this notebook, and it has kind of the links to all the different kind of papers and GitHub links. But Simple Transformers just kind of, they have a few kind of easily implementable models, including a question answering model. And it kind of makes things fairly easy to train and evaluate. Obviously it makes things a little more black box, but for just kind of simple showcase, it's pretty nice. Okay, so again, yeah, I'm using from simple transformers, I'm going to use the question answering model. And then here's kind of some of the training arguments that I used, again, kind of arbitrary. I'm using a max sequence length of 384. And then just training, I just trained for two epochs here. And again, the model, it comes with kind of a lot of defaults. So in this notebook, I kind of laid out what some of those default hyperparameters are, just in case you're curious, because again, this implementation is it's pretty simple, which kind of takes away some of the explicit parameters. Okay, so I'm using, again, the SQuAD version 2 and loaded it in. So again, it comes with, a paragraph and then some questions. And then after training it, let me just show kind of how things are laid out. So train generated some predictions. Here's for, kind of some of the first questions in the testing database. Kind of one of the first ones, we have a context paragraph about Normandy. And it's about just kind of about the Normans, who they were, where they were from, where they were located, what time period, everything like that. So then there's some questions about that, and the model has to kind of answer these based on that paragraph. So the first question, for instance, in what country is Normandy located? And the model that I trained, the prediction was Francia, based on that context paragraph. So that's kind of, just a really quick kind of run through about SQuAD and, the implementation of, SQuAD using Hugging Face, using some transformers. This is, again, using a BERT implementation of that. Yeah, so that's kind of quickly. I thought that would take a little bit longer to run through, but does anybody have any questions about kind of this code, or question answering in general?
So Matthew,
Yes.
so this code that you have here, it's fine either way. Just I'm kind of wondering, did you get this? Did you compose that code yourself, or did you derive that from one of the Hugging Face examples, or where did you get that from?
Yeah, so I created it myself based on Hugging Face examples, and then again using this this other package, the simple transformers built on top, and just kind of created that. So it's only a few lines of code. I'll send it out,
Sure.
And you can kind of play around with that.
Do you so what's your impression, having worked with that, of the SQuAD data set? Obviously we it's kind of a common kind of sample data set, but how do you kind of what's kind of your impression on how applicable that would be to what we're trying to do?
I think Mike mentioned it a couple weeks ago when he presented. Kind of depending on what direction we take, kind of our implementation. I think question answering could be, an interesting way to kind of build out a model. This data set, I thought, I wasn't really familiar with it before, but it seems like a kind of an interesting task. And, I think there could be a lot of, use out of something like this for what we're looking for. I guess we're kind of trying to figure out what exactly we want to kind of build in.
Mhm.
But I think something like this could potentially be, something to look at.
Yeah. Okay. One of the challenges I think that we're likely going to have if we were to use a SQuAD type approach is the fact
Right.
that it is, basically using a kind of a supervised, and human annotated approach, right, for training. And we wouldn't necessarily have that. We would definitely want to do super question answering, but we're probably looking at more of a unsupervised approach, is from what I'm looking, right? So,
Right.
and not that what you're doing here isn't extra, useful, because it definitely is. But I think that's one of the challenges I think with the question answering we had is that the types of human annotated data sets like SQuAD are going to be few and far between for
Right.
what we're going to do. Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, because I guess what we're looking at, it's going to be unsupervised or semi-supervised, right?
Yes. And so we would and of course the BERT, whenever you train it with the BERT layer, of course it's semi-supervised in the sense that you are using a pre-trained BERT transformer, right? So that part is semi-supervised, but the actual kind of generative model there is basically supervised, right? You're feeding it with these kind of 100,000, 50,000 examples, right? So so it would be interesting to try to apply a trained model from SQuAD on something, say, related to one of our data sets. My guess is it probably wouldn't work very well, but just because, the training examples would probably be very different from the kinds of questions that we would likely want to answer it. But at the same time, it'd be interesting to try.
Right.
So, to take like the SQuAD model here and then, try asking it some questions based on, kind of some of our data. It would be interesting to see. So.
Okay. Anyone else have any other questions or?
Actually, I just have one. What I'm curious about is what are the operational definitions of what is a question and what is unanswerable?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So, I was only able to kind of skim through this, but there's two papers kind of one about the original release of SQuAD, and then this one was the updated version 2018. And I believe their definition was on an unanswerable question was based on again, kind of the human ground truthing. If you have this context paragraph and you scan through it and you don't think that you can answer the question based on that paragraph, that's what they deem unanswerable, which again is going to be something that's completely it has to be hand labeled, it has to be generated by human hand.
Well, that comes back to the second part of that question is then what is the quantified criteria for the system determining that something is unanswered? I mean, at what point does it stop and say this question is unanswered? Is there kind of like some kind of entropy measure or some kind of amount of processing going through?
I believe there is. I'll have to kind of read up a little bit more on exactly what it is, but I think there is some kind of there is. I believe it is like an entropy kind of type of determination where they I think it's in here somewhere, but I'll kind of read more on that.
Yeah, but that also comes back to that first question of what exactly is a question. I mean, that's a very vague topic, so we've got to normally establish some kind of operational definition of a question. So for the purposes of this exercise, a question is something that, so I'm assuming just from looking at the question is about factual extraction from text as opposed to any kind of implicature being made. So questions like, why are they called the Normans, would probably fall outside the scope of what
Right.
we would consider to be operational definition of a question. So is that actually defined as what constitutes a question that you recall seeing?
I believe it is, and it is like you said, it's very extractive.
Okay.
I don't remember what the exact definition, what the exact kind of what they laid it out as, but it is something that's typically the answers to the questions were something that was actually stated explicitly in the paragraph.
Okay.
So there wasn't, I don't think it was kind of a summary type.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because the measures of performance are often, dependent on how narrowly or broadly we have these operational definitions. So, I mean, you can improve what appears to be the performance of Q&A if you start to really, really narrow down the scope of what you're allowed to ask as questions.
Right.
So, and that's really my whole interest here is just to try to clarify what kind of the parameters are that we're seeing these performance measures on. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything to add? Any questions? Anything?
Hi, this is Paul. I have a quick question about this. Is there any kind of confidence or, or like, probability assigned to a particular answer? If that actually fell out of this, that would be really nice, right? Then you could set a threshold and then just control how, risky you want to be when answering.
Right. So I believe some of the model that I used didn't really have that built in, but I believe some of the high performing models on the SQuAD leaderboard do have that kind of built in, where they have like a probability, a confidence associated during training. But yeah, so that is something that people have kind of played with because there's some of the questions people have kind of trained their models to have like multiple possible answers. So there is kind of some of that's built in. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions? Mark? Mark, are you there?
Is that notebook shareable?
Yes, I will. I'll get this kind of cleaned up, and then we'll distribute this out.
Okay, you can put a comment in the inside the spreadsheet for these
Yes.
meetings. Yep. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I'll send this out so everyone can kind of take a look at it. Again, it's a pretty simple kind of implementation of it, but it's something kind of an interesting kind of facet of NLP is the question answering, and it kind of something that we'll have to see how applicable it would be to what we want to do, but I think it's still fairly interesting in terms of a question. All right. Mark?
Yes.
Is there anything else?
No, that was great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's all I have. Well, thanks everybody.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Any volunteers right
you.
now before we go? Any volunteers for the Friday? Rod, Vlad? Is there anything you'd like to talk about?
For Mark, Friday I won't be able to attend. So.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay,
I-
so I'll keep writing.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good, good. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.